Like a lot of leaders, I got into scouting because my son was in. He was in Cubs in London, very keen. He actually got in underage. And when we came out to Australia, one of our priorities was to find him a Cub pack, which we were fortunate, we found one straight away. So the second week we were in Australia, he trotted along to his first Cub meeting. And they had just arranged their program for the rest of the term. And he came back so enthusiastic, all these wonderful things they were going to do that I could never have dreamt of doing in London. And at the end of it, he said, "Oh, and Mum, they want parents to come and help. Will you come next week?" So the next week, I duly trotted along with him. And the Arcala was a 6-foot-plus trainee teacher. Lovely bloke, and I was the only parent sort of, fronting up, and I said, "Oh, I gather you want some help," and his eyes gleamed a bit, and I said, "Well, if I'm going to do it, I'd like to do it properly. Is there some training I can do?" Talk about being naive. So that was 41 and a half years ago, and I'm still hanging around scouting.
Brian McCarthy, but everybody calls me Mac. If you think about how I got into scouting, it was somewhat odd. Back in the 1930s, I come from an army family, and we were at a place called Dhulikhel in northern India. And my mother was a headmistress of the local army school, and one day a chappie came into the district and who had obviously been in scouting in England, and he said, "Why don't we start scouts here? And we need somewhere to run this, and after the school buildings after hours would be just the spot." So my mother said yes. And because of that, I got in kind of early, and he formed the first Dhulikhel scout troop. I don't know whether it was ever registered or anything happened at all about that. And after there for a while, he got moved on, and that was the end of scouting there. And that was the last I had of it in scouting at all until I went back to England to school, and there was a Cub pack formed there, there was a group there, and so I became a Cub, so that I was a scout before I was a Cub. And I stayed in the Cub pack until 1939, when war broke out and we all moved round, and I dropped out of scouting at that stage. The family moved, broke up and with the war and one thing and another. So I didn't have any more to do with scouting until I came out to Australia, and my son became of Cub age, and that was in North Ringwood, and I got called into coming and helping with the bottle drives and this and that and the other thing there, and from time to time I got asked to go with parent camps and one thing and another, and I discovered that I could do more with ropes than they could. I'm a trained sapper, and so that was how I got into doing that sort of thing. And then I stayed as a member of the committee until they got to the stage where they said, "Look, you're either going to be chairman of the committee or take a uniform." And I stayed as an AVL for a while, and then the VL disappeared. I don't know what became of him. He just disappeared. He was a gangster, was in gang show and all that sort of stuff. So he was on and off, but then finally he was off and didn't come back on. and so I got left with the venture unit.
My involvement with Scouting goes back to 1974, when I bought 24 snowballs from a young bloke who was raising funds for a jamboree back about then. And it's my involvement with Scouting from July 74 till now. It's been the dearest 24 snowballs I've ever bought, believe you me. But I've had a ball, I really have, with all the time. The relationships have been really, really good. Made some good friends who have been supportive of me, and we support them if something goes wrong health-wise. We look after one another from there, and we've made some really good friendships.
Well, I guess the group of friends that you make as leader, being able to, one hopes, influence young people and direct them in the right direction. For a great deal of that time, and I suppose it still exists, there's the problem of employment. And one of the things which we ran whenever we could, a venture unit, was to prepare people for job interviews, looking for work, this sort of thing, so to give them the best chance we could of getting employment. And that, I think, was important. And the other thing was, which I was very surprised to get some feedback from years later from venturers, was critical thinking. What is important and what isn't important. And I think that's the sort of thing which really meant most to me about Scouting, being able to develop young people in what I believed, I don't know about anybody else's, but I believe was the best training that we could possibly offer them for life. And that, I think, was the most important part of it all.
Well, Scouting's meant a few things, really. Initially, it was a chance to participate in what my boys were doing, and it was quite heartwarming, really, because I was a mother of 2 boys, and boisterous and real boys, and it was so heartening to find that other boys that age were just as obnoxious at times and did all the same sorts of things, but we had great fun with them at Cubs, learning through activities and camps and things, and that was a real pleasure on one level. And on another, being a newcomer to the country and forming a network of friends. Other leaders were very supportive, and it was like an extended family. So that, was a great benefit to me personally, and I think it helped me to give back to the kids more of what they needed. And as time's gone on, and I'm no longer obviously working with the youth members, except I did have a chance last year for Cabaret. I came up here to Gilwell for Cabaret, and 3,750 cubs were and a lot of them came through the shop where I was helping out. So that was really nice to have the kids around, and as a reminder of what we're all in Scouting for, because even if we're not working with them day to day, most of what we do flows through and benefits them in some way.
No, I've enjoyed it, and since I've moved away from working with youth, and more with the adults and the training things like that, I find that quite, is quite pleasant, gratifying, and endeavouring to point them to what I believe is in the right direction. So that's really how it is. No planning, no plots, no nothing, just, good heavens, well, I'll do that and have a go at it. So I've come to think about it, that's pretty much all my life.
As a group leader, I saw the formation of a Corran-Warrable rover crew and supported them, getting them started. And one night being asked to be in uniform and be prepared to go out in the bush, and I was actually invested as an honorary rover in the rover crew as one. Another one is seeing a young chap who had some learning difficulties go through to get his Queen Scout Award from there. What else was there? Oh, the 92-93 Australian Jamboree up at Ballarat was my first one. And that was a lot of work, believe you me.